Once upon a time, there was an old man named Cyrus. And Cyrus was an old security guard who was responsible for guarding the treasury at his local bait shop, which might sound strange that a bait shop that sells worms and leeches and other things for fishing would have a treasury, but they were the most successful bait shop in the entire Southeast, and they made a lot of money because people love to fish. And the owner of that bait shop, named Billy Ray, did not trust the banks. He did not want to have his money in a bank. So he built his own treasury in the back of his flagship store. And if you don't know what that is, that means that's the main store. That's where it all started. And it was in a little town in Arkansas. And that's where he kept his millions of dollars, if you can believe that. A guy who started a very modest bait shop when he was a young man had grown it into a great fishing empire. And he had stores all over the Southeast. But again, his flagship store was in a small town in Arkansas, and that's where the treasury was. And Cyrus's job was to guard that treasury, and he worked the night shift. There was another guard named Tina, and Tina worked the day shift. But Cyrus was a bit of a night owl. He enjoyed the peace and quiet of the evenings, the sounds that the crickets would make. It was a quiet time, and one night he was guarding the treasury, and he saw something strange in the sky.
Cyrus loved to look at the sky. Cyrus looked up at the sky every night while he guarded the treasury. You see, there really wasn't much to do when you're guarding a treasury in Arkansas. There's not many people there, and not many people knew he had the treasury. They used the banks. And this particular night, when Cyrus was looking up at the sky, he saw one particular star that glowed a little brighter than the rest. And Cyrus looked at that same spot every night, so he wondered why tonight did that star look especially bright. And he stared and he stared and he tried to figure out, is that a satellite? Is it an airplane? No, it's not blinking. There's no red lights on it. So what is it? What could it possibly... Oh! And then Cyrus looked down and he saw worms everywhere and crickets, and they were all gathered in a circle all around one particular little worm. Cyrus couldn't believe what he was looking at. What was happening beneath his feet? Why were these worms and crickets all circled and gathered together like they were a meeting? It was a meeting. Cyrus didn't know what to do. He looked back up, and that star was gone. Gone, completely gone. He couldn't figure out what was going on there. He looked back down at the worms. They were still there. They were still having their meeting. Cyrus got down real low. Got down on his hands on a little plank, and he got really, really low. And the worms and the crickets, they weren't leaving. They weren't running away. And as he got lower, he thought he could hear a little voice. Something like a little voice talking. And he realized that the worm in the middle of the big group was talking to the rest of the group. When he sees Cyrus come down, he says, "Well, hello, Cyrus. We wondered when you'd finally catch on to this." And Cyrus was mind blown. But he wasn't scared. They were just worms and crickets, so what were they going to do to him? So he said, I didn't know that this was even possible. That worms and crickets could meet and speak English. It was mind-blowing. So Cyrus says, well, what's going on here? Do you mind me asking? Or should I get you back into your cages and your boxes and stuff? And he said, no need for that. We'll go back as soon as we're done here. I was just so curious. Cyrus is like, well, what's happening here? What could you possibly be doing? Well, the little worm said, first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Ted, and we know you're Cyrus. It's nice to meet you. I'm not sure if you're aware, Cyrus, but there's a treasury here, and we're looking to get rich.
And Cyrus said, well, of course I know that there's a treasury here. My entire job is guarding the treasury. That's why I have my trusty taser, mace, and 6-shooter on my hip to protect the treasury from anyone who would want to rob it. And as the evening protector of the treasury, I cannot allow you, even though you are an incredibly exceptional talking worm, I cannot allow you to rob this treasury because I will lose my job. And if I don't have a job, then I don't have any money. And if I don't have any money, I can't afford my home, and I'll be very sad. So if you're planning on robbing this treasury, you need to check yourself, little worm Ted. And maybe you should try pulling these antics on Tina during the day shift, because old Cyrus here is no pushover. So Ted gathered all the worms and the crickets around, and they huddled up, and they were far enough away from Cyrus he couldn't hear what they were saying. He just heard the faint whispers of crickets and worms, which is a very distinct sound that I don't even know how to describe. But if you've ever heard worms and crickets whispering, you know that sound. So Cyrus sighed. He knew that they were hatching some sort of plan, and it was most likely going to go down during the day because, well, he told them that they should rob the treasury during the day because he didn't want anything to do with it. But he started to feel a little bit bad because he was worried that now Tina's job might be in jeopardy. And, you know, she wasn't quite the security guard that Cyrus believed himself to be, but she was a nice lady and she had a family, and he would hate for her to lose her job over some worms and some crickets stealing old Billy Ray's money. And then he thought about it, and he wondered, well, what are they going to even do with money? They don't have any pockets. Where are they going to put this money? None of this makes sense. And then he maybe thought that he had taken too much of his medication and it was making his head a little fuzzy. So he kind of smacked himself in the side of the head and shook his ears out and blinked his eyes a few times and thought that might get rid of whatever he was seeing. But no, sure enough, he was not imagining things. They were still huddled up in a corner, just going on and whispering and plotting and whispering. So the next morning, when they traded shifts, Cyrus pulled Tina aside, and the worms and the crickets were gone. They were back in their cages at this point. And he said to Tina, Tina, you're not going to believe this, but I believe that the worms and the crickets are going to try and rob this here treasury. And they're going to try and rob this here treasury during the day. Partly that is my fault, and I apologize. I would not let them rob it during the evening. And so anyway, I just wanted to give you a polite heads up that this might go down today, and you should just be on high alert. And Tina said,
okay, Cyrus, I'm gonna be sure to make sure that the worms and the crickets don't take all the money. And Tina nodded very carefully to Cyrus because she was worried Cyrus was losing his mind. She was afraid her friend didn't know what he was talking about, but she didn't want to disturb him, so she said, you know what, Cyrus? I got this. I think I can take care of this. And let Cyrus go. Cyrus left very nervous. He didn't think that Tina was going to be able to handle this, but he was tired, and he was wondering if what he saw was even real. So Cyrus went home and slept, and just hoped that everything would be okay when he returned to Billy Ray's later. Well, when Cyrus did return later, Tina was there. Everything was fine. And she said, "You know what? I think you're going to be fine, Cyrus. Maybe you were just tired. Maybe the earthworms aren't really talking, and maybe they're not going to take our money. What do you think?" Cyrus said, "I suppose that could be true. Maybe I was just imagining things." "Okay, well, you have a good night, Tina." And Cyrus took over his shift. Well, that night, Cyrus decided to look up at the sky again. Take a good long look. That beautiful sky. He had already checked on the worms and the crickets, and everyone was there. No one was talking. It seemed like, yeah, maybe I was just imagining things. And oh, wait, what's that? He saw that bright light again. That star that had come and then disappeared was back again. And Cyrus was like, "Oh, wow. I swear that wasn't there last time I looked." And then he looked down again. And there the worms were, and the crickets, all in a circle talking to each other. He got down quick. "Okay, what's going on here? I thought you were going to rob the Treasury in the day with Tina around and not me. What's happening here?" And Ted looked up at Cyrus and said, "You know what? I got to tell you something, Cyrus. Tina already knows about us. Tina's in on it. It was actually Tina's idea. She just thought she couldn't get in the Treasury, so she talked us into this. And the truth is we need you. Cyrus, we need you to break into the Treasury." Cyrus was like, "I can't do that. That's wrong. I would never do that. I mean, I would allow crickets and worms to do it, but I would never do it. You're going to have to do this on your own." And Ted said, "Well, I was really hoping you didn't have to say that. So now we're going to have to do it." And Ted looked up above Cyrus's head. Cyrus looked above his head. And that little light that was in the sky was now right above him. And it shined really bright. And Cyrus fell asleep. When Cyrus woke up, he was in the middle of the field. There were no worms, no crickets, nothing. Just Tina standing over him. And Cyrus, "You okay, buddy?" Cyrus was like, Yeah. We should check the Treasury. I think the crickets and the worms, they took the money." And Tina said, "Oh no, really? Okay." So they got up, they ran over to the Treasury, they did the combination, they spun the wheel, and they cracked open the safe, and they looked inside, and all the money was there. And Cyrus was like, "Well, I just can't imagine what's going on here." And Tina says, "I know what's going on. Cyrus, you need sleep." The end.
So once upon a time, there was a little puppy named Gilbert, and Gilbert loved his family. He had a friend named Jack, and Jack was 7, just like Mikey, and Jack loved Gilbert, and Gilbert loved Jack. And together, they would play. Jack would throw the ball, and Gilbert the puppy would run and get it, and he'd bring it back. And then, if Jack gave him food, he'd say, "Come on, Gilbert." And Gilbert was just a perfect little dog who would go and eat his food, say, "Thank you, Jack," and go back to his bed. He was such a sweet dog. But one day, Jack took Gilbert the dog to the dog park. And Gilbert saw so many other dogs. He saw dogs peeing on bushes. He saw dogs running in circles. He saw owners saying, "Behave! You need to behave." And Gilbert thought, does this mean I could be a dog that doesn't behave? I could disobey Jack? Maybe I should try it. So the next day, when Jack threw the ball to Gilbert, Gilbert picked up the ball and he kept running. He ran and he ran. He did not run back to Jack. He ran all through the town. And everybody was waving. "Hey, look at that dog. Look at that dog with that ball. Where is he running to?" And then you'd see Jack running after him. "My dog is not obeying me. Why does he disobey?" And Jack ran and ran until finally he ran back to his house. And Jack said, "Gilbert, why would you do that? Why didn't you listen? Why didn't you bring the ball back to me like you usually do?" But Gilbert didn't say anything. Then it was time to eat. So Jack filled Gilbert's bowl with dog food. And usually, Gilbert would just eat it perfectly and go back to his bed. But on this day, Gilbert went and he picked up a mouthful of dog food and he spit it all over the room. And Jack said, "Gilbert, why? Why are you disobeying? You used to be such a good dog." And then last but not least, usually Gilbert would go and pee in the yard. But on this day, Gilbert peed on the carpet in the house. "Gilbert, why did you do that?" But Gilbert went to bed that night and he thought, I kinda got in trouble today. I've never been in trouble before. I tried out being a dog that was kinda bad, but I don't really think I like being a bad dog. It's not very fun to be disobedient. I think I should listen to Jack. Because when I listen to Jack, we have fun. We play fetch. I eat my food. I pee in the yard like I should. And everybody's happy. So the next day, Jack threw the ball, and Gilbert brought it back. And Jack poured the food, and Gilbert ate it up very clean and neat and said thank you. And Gilbert peed in the yard. So Gilbert had been a great dog that day, back to his old self. Jack said, Gilbert, buddy boy, glad to have you back." And Gilbert licked Jack's face, and they both went to bed. But then Jack got to thinking, wow, I love my dog Gilbert so much. He might need a friend. Maybe I should get another dog, because then Gilbert could have a friend when I'm at school, and they could play together. And then when I get home from school, I could have 2 dogs to play with. And so Jack asked his mom, Mom, can I get another dog? And his mom said, you're very good with your dog. Sure, we can get a second. So they went to the pound. And at the very end, in the last little part of the area where you could adopt a dog, there was this dog named Rex. And he was big, and he had a bark. But Jack thought, this looks like the dog for me. So he got Rex and he brought him home. He said, "Gilbert, meet your new friend." And Rex just growled. Arr. Gilbert thought, oh boy, I don't know if this guy is gonna be my friend. And Rex said, "Stick with me, kid. You think you've been bad before? You haven't seen bad." So Rex and Gilbert waited until Jack went to school. And as soon as Jack was at school, Rex and Gilbert tore up the house. They ate all the cushions. They pulled out all the stuffing. They peed on the furniture. They were having the best time being bad dogs. And when Jack got home from school, he saw a giant mess. Oh no! Gilbert, Rex, what have you done? And Rex ran out the door, and Gilbert chased after him. He said, "We're real bad dogs now." And they ran through the town together. "Take that, buddy." And they ran up the hill at the park together. Woohoo! And they found the park pool, and they ran down the slide, whooing into the water, splash. These 2 dogs were having the best time being bad dogs. Finally, a police officer saw these 2 bad dogs and said, "Hey guys, what are you doing around these parts?" And he took a giant net, and he got the 2 bad dogs, Gilbert and Rex. And Gilbert and Rex got put in the back of the police car. And they thought, oh no, we've really done it now, haven't we? And Gilbert said, Rex, it might be fun to be bad, but it also can be fun to get along with the people you live with. And Rex said, oh, well, I've never really had any owners before. I don't know what that feels like. And Gilbert said, well, hey, how about we go back to Jack and we'll convince him together we can be pals. We'll be good together. And we can say we're sorry for tearing up the house and eating all the cushions and peeing on the carpet. And he said, okay, I'm willing to give that a shot. So the police officer brought Rex and Gilbert back to their house. And he said, Jack, your 2 dogs have torn up the town. Jack said, thank you so much, officer, for bringing him back to me. I promise I'll take good care of him. And from then on, the 2 dogs decided they were going to be good together and be the best dogs they could be for their owner, Jack. And that day, they played fetch together, and Rex thought, wow, so this is what it's like to play fetch. And they ate food together, and Rex thought, wow, so this is what it's like to share. And at night, they gave each other one big lick, and Rex thought, so this is what it's like to cuddle. And they all fell asleep. And Rex was so happy to have a new home with people and dogs who loved him. And Gilbert was so happy to have a new friend and to have learned that it's not that much fun to disobey, although it's a little fun. And Jack was so happy to have 2 dogs to play with. The end.
Eve walked to school every day. Her parents didn't have a car, they didn't have a bike, they didn't have a scooter for her. So this little 12-year-old girl would walk 5 miles every day to get to her middle school. And as she walked down the road on the sidewalk, because safety is important, she would see the other students glide by on motorcycles, see them ride by on horses, see them motor by on those little one-wheeled doohickeys that nobody really knows what they're called. We just know they're stupid. And whenever she got to school, Eve would be a bit of a mess. Walking 4 miles makes your head sweaty. It makes your hair messy. It makes your feet stink. And the kids at school, they let her know that her hair was messy and that her feet stunk. Eve wished for anything that she could have some mode of transportation to get her to school. One day she asked her parents, Mom, Dad, can you please drive me to school? Can you please get me a bus ticket? Can you please get me a hang glider? Anything, so that I don't have to walk to school. And her parents told her, Eve, you're a smart girl. Figure it out yourself. So Eve thought and thought and thought. And for Eve, she does her best thinking, oddly enough, when she's walking. So she walked and walked and thought all around the city until she wound up in front of a store she had never seen before. It was called Vespa. And inside, what did she find? But a sorceress named Vespa. And Vespa said, Eve, come in. It seems like you have something you'd like to talk with me about. And Eve said, how do you know my name? And the sorceress said, my name is Vespa. I am a sorceress. I feel energy. I hear energy. I taste energy. And right now, your energy stinks. And he said, yes, that must be my feet you're tasting. Because I've been walking and I've been thinking and I've been wishing. Oh, wishing, you say, says the sorceress Vespa. That is something I could help with. What do you need? But the thing is, Vespa already knew what Eve needed. Eve told her story about walking to school and seeing the cars and seeing the skateboards and seeing the scooters and seeing the buses and seeing people on hang gliders and seeing the annoying people on the one-wheeled scooter that nobody really knows what the name is, and not having a way to get to school without getting there with her hair being all messy and her being sweaty and her feet stinking. And how she wishes there could be a way to get to school on her own. With that, Vespa said, "What would you like to wish for? Just say it. Say, 'I wish for,' and I, Vespa, will provide it for you. But you need to give me one thing in return." "What is that?" said Eve. And that thing that Vespa wanted is not necessarily a thing, but it's that I will come to you one day, and you must repay the favor to me for what I'm going to do for you right now. Well, what are you going to do for me right now? Just say the words, Eve. I wish for a better way to get to school. A way to get to school on wheels. A way to get to school so I won't be stinky. So that my feet won't smell. So that I won't be sweaty. And he said, "Well, I don't think I have to use that many words, sorceress. But I wish for a way to get to school so my feet won't stink." And with that, Vespa the sorceress turned into Vespa the scooter. "Hop on, Eve. I will take you anywhere you want." And with that, Eve went on Vespa, and together they jetted through the city. They made cute little noises as they darted around cars and darted around people on scooters and skateboards, darted around that guy on the one-wheeled scooter thing that nobody really knows what the name is but is really annoying. And everywhere Eve went, people said, "Eve, Eve, what are you riding?" He said, "I'm riding a Vespa. I'm riding the Vespa." And so, over the coming days and weeks and months, Eve rode Vespa to school. And she also put on a helmet, because wearing a helmet's very important for safety when you ride any motor vehicle. Eve knew that, and Vespa provided that for her as well, at no additional cost. And she came to school, and people no longer said, "Eve, your hair is messy." Nobody said, "Eve, you're sweaty." Nobody said, "Eve, your feet stink." They said, "Eve, you and your Vespa are so cool." And Eve felt wonderful about herself. She was already an A student, but with that she became an A+ student. And she used to just, be in the school show, but as backstage wearing all black, moving props around. But she became the lead in Annie. They didn't even make her wear a wig because her hair had natural curls. She was the perfect Annie all along. And she used to just be the equipment manager for the field hockey team. But Eve became the starting center, which, as we all know in field hockey, is a very important position. So for the next 7 years of school, Eve rode around in her Vespa, and she was the most magical person in a way that other people would say, there's something magical about you, Eve. And Eve would give a knowing laugh, and her Vespa would give a knowing little toot. And everybody was like, "How'd you get the Vespa to do that?" She's like, "I have a remote control." And then winked at the Vespa. And then one headlight on the Vespa also turned on. And nobody questioned it because she already established that she has this relationship with her Vespa and she has a remote control. But then one day after she graduated college, she packed up all her stuff, was ready to pack it on the Vespa, but the Vespa was nowhere to be found. She ran to the campus police at her elite East Coast university and told them what happened, how her Vespa was missing, how they must do something to find her immediately. And they were like, "Did you just call your Vespa a her?" And Eve was like, "Are you questioning whether or not I can genderize my Vespa? Because that's not right." And so campus security stepped away from that situation because they didn't want any of that. And they said, "No, nobody has reported any Vespas. In fact, the only Vespa we've ever seen on campus has been the one that has been ridden around by you, Eve." So Eve ran to the police station, asked the same question. No Vespa. She ran around to the local chop shops. No Vespa. So Eve eventually just ran back to her dormitory. At this point, her hair was a mess, and she was sweaty, and her feet, they stunk. These were feelings she hadn't felt in ages. And here is Eve, somebody whose childhood was marked by feeling like she didn't fit in, feeling like she was different, feeling that she smelled and looked different from the other kids, and all that changed in with just one wish. Now here she is back to feeling that same way, being smelly, being sweaty, being a mess, being on the brink of being an adult. And the person, the vehicle that had helped her was gone. She started to cry. Eve didn't know how she could continue to this next stage of life without her Vespa. And as her tears hit the ground, she heard a soft cackle behind her. Ha 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 ha. Eve turned around, and there was Vespa, the sorceress, standing before her, saying, "Do you remember the day we met, Eve? That I told you that there would be a time that I would come to you for a wish?" Eve said, "Yes, I remember the terms of service." Well, Vespa said, "Now is that moment. I took you a long way. I literally took you a long way. I took you to and from your middle school and to and from your high school. I took you to and from your elite East Coast university. Thousands of miles logged on my wheels, which are my feet. Do you smell that, Eve?" Eve took a whiff, and indeed, she could smell Vespa's festering, sweaty, disgusting feet. Vespa said, "I did it all for you, because I believed in you, Eve. Most people think a sorceress might have ulterior motives, and many within the sisterhood, they do. But not I, Eve. I've always been here for you, so this is what I ask for you, Eve." Eve said, "Anything. I owe you, Vespa, the sorceress. If somebody comes to you and needs help, needs a ride, needs a little step up, don't just ride past them. Stop and see if they could hop on. See if you could help take them to where they're going, much in the way that I have taken you to where you are now." And with that, Eve nodded, and Vespa, she turned into a poof of smoke. And then Eve turned back around and saw a young student trying to get out of their dorm, fumbling with their luggage, falling over themselves. Students doing nothing but laughing. Eve walked over there, seeing this disheveled human being with their hair messy, being all sweaty, and their own feet stinking as well. He said, "Can I help you?" The end.
Once upon a time, there was a young boy named Carl. And Carl loved art. And Carl, from a very early age, started obviously with finger painting. As a kid, he would make big messes. He would start on the paper that his mother would lay out for him, and eventually his paintings would migrate over to floors and walls and rugs and Nana's favorite pillow that she had passed on. And Carl's mother was very upset that Carl got paint on that pillow. But from an early age, she understood that Carl had a gift, and Carl was not only driven, but he was prolific. And prolific means that he used to do it all the time. And he really wasn't interested in anything else. His parents tried to take him outside to just get some fresh air, maybe a little vitamin D. He was a pasty young fellow on account of the fact that he stayed in his room mostly and painted. And by age 5, he had stopped painting with his fingers, and his Nana, having forgiven him for painting on her favorite pillow that she had passed on to him, got him a set of paintbrushes. So Carl began painting with his paintbrushes. And again, he would paint on some paper. His mom got him some canvases. His dad thought it might be interesting to take some of the old scraps that they had in the garage. They weren't really good at throwing things out in Carl's family. The dad was a little bit of a hoarder, and he would do these projects around the house, and there would always be leftover wood and metal and things like that. And he always thought, I'm gonna put that scrap metal and wood to good use one day, and I don't know what that is. And Carl's mom always would get on his dad about not cleaning up the garage, and she got very frustrated with him because she didn't know what he was going to use that for, and he didn't know what he was going to use that for, until one day he saw Carl, painting on his canvas as he always did. And he had been watching a documentary on PBS about found object art and thought, what? I've got all that junk in my garage. I wonder if Carl could make something out of that and paint it and make that trash beautiful again. So he said to his wife, Janet. Her name was Janet. His name was Bill. Bill said to Janet, he said, Janet, I have a solution for the junk problem in the garage. And she said, well, Bill, what's that solution? Well, I'm going to tell Carl what the solution is, and we're going to surprise you for Mother's Day.
Janet had a hard time believing this. All of this junk in the garage was going to be cleaned up. What a dream. Bill said, you're going to believe it when you see it. Now get inside and relax, because Carl and I have something to do. So Bill walked over to Carl, who was sitting on his painted Nana pillow. He sat on that for comfort while he painted on his canvas. And he was in the state of flow, just creating beautiful art. Carl was an old soul, to match his old name. And Bill tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, bud, do you want to come into the garage with me? I have something to show you. And Carl, snapping out of his art stupor, said, Dad, I thought I was never really allowed in the garage because all of your projects are in there. He said, well, now this is going to be our project. So Carl capped his paints. All the paints needed capping so they wouldn't dry out. He capped his paints and he stood up and he glanced at his painted Nana pillow and he said he'll keep it in the grass. So he walked into the garage with his dad, and his dad pulled back a burlap curtain. He had hidden all of the wood and the metal behind a curtain, thinking that out of sight, out of mind. He pulled it back and Carl said, big whoop, what is this? This is all trash. And his dad said, look beyond the trash. What could you do with it? Think of purpose. You're prolific. This was the first time that Carl had ever heard his dad say this to him. He had a word of the day calendar, so he knew what prolific meant. So it meant a lot to him to hear his dad say this. Carl went up and started touching all of the dusty metal and the splintered wood. And he said, ow, gosh, Dad, are you trying to give me splinters? And he said, no, son. This is your new medium. I'd like you to make some art with this. You've done the canvas, you've done the pillows, you've done the finger painting, you've done the papers. What you haven't done is what I saw in this PBS documentary, and I think you can do this. Carl lifted a giant piece of metal. It must have been for a barn door frame. And his 5-year-old body had pulled this outside, and so he could see it in the sun. And just then he saw the sun hit the corner piece of the metal and started to make the orangey rust look gold. And his dad knelt down next to him and said, Your mom has been on me about all of this trash. Shall we make this into a treasure? Mother's Day is right around the corner. And Carl took his dad's hands, his face in his hands, and said, "That sounds perfect, Papa. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll even let you touch my paintbrushes."
Well, Bill was flattered because Carl didn't let anyone touch his paintbrushes. They were sacred paintbrushes to Carl. So he felt like this was a real moment. This was a real bonding moment. Because, if you remember, Carl was pretty much a solitary artist. He was a one-man show. This wasn't a team sport, this painting endeavor. Carl spent hours and hours by himself in his room working on his masterpieces. He didn't have any friends. He barely saw his parents, only when he came out for meals and occasionally passing them in the hallways. And so for Carl to let his father into his sacred painting circle was a big deal. And that moment was not lost on Bill. If you're a dad and your kid actually wants to hang out with you, it means a lot. So Bill started painting, and he dipped the paintbrush in some magenta paint, and he made the first stroke on that metal door. And Carl said, whoa, that is not proper technique, Dad. And Bill was like, "Carl, buddy, are you really going to micromanage me and ruin this moment? This is a chance for us to create something together for Mom." And he said, "Yeah, no, I understand that, Dad, but you got to understand too, there's only one captain on this ship, okay? And that's Captain Carl. And if we're going to do this, I need to be the creative director of this project." And Bill was like, "I'm 46 years old and you're 7 years old. I really think I can, lead the charge on this." So they bickered back and forth like children for a good 30 minutes until finally Bill was just exhausted. And as any parent who's ever argued with their child for any length of time knows, sometimes you just give up. So he let Carl lead the way. And they got to painting, and it was wonderful. And Bill realized as they were painting this giant piece of metal that Carl really was the more qualified captain of this ship. And what they painted was a beautiful portrait of Carl's mother. And they really worked together, and it was kind of abstract. There were a lot of different colors going on, and Carl was really into outer space as well. A lot of his, there's a running motif in a lot of his work. There were a lot of stars, and he was very much inspired at the beginning by Van Gogh's Starry Night, and he kind of took that and ran with it. And then, he had a book on the solar system. And so it was this really interesting portrait of his mother in outer space, standing next to
a ladder made of all of the wooden pieces, and each rung had a part of his mother that he looked up to and loved. One part was her selflessness. One part was her ability to make the silliest shaped pancakes in the mornings. One part was her beautiful eyes, and one part was the freedom that she gave him to create. So Bill stepped back, moved by this gorgeous outer space portrait of his mother leaning against a ladder, where when he was looking at it close and adding dots and stripes and forming paint in one area, he couldn't see the big picture. And Carl kept saying, "Trust it. Just trust the process, Dad." His dad said, "Carl, I've told you I'm 46 years old. I know how to trust the process." And he said, "But do you?" So all of those words kept ringing through Carl's head and Bill's mind while they stepped back and took in this beautiful portrait of his mother. And Bill had one tear fall down his cheek, and Carl looked up and was moved that his father was moved by something that they created together. Because as you know, this was the very first collaboration that Carl has ever done with art. And his father looked at him and said, son, you've been collaborating all along. Because although you're painting with just your 2 hands or your 10 fingers, you're painting on the papers that we've given you, the paint that we've given you, the pillow that you stole from Nana. She gifted it to you, but you did ruin it. And he said, ruin? And he said, you're right, made it better. And Carl said, that gives me an idea. He scurried over and he was looking desperately for this pillow. He left it in the grass. He had no idea where it was. That was his creative pillow. That was his safety blanket. How could he ever create anything without that pillow again? And his dad ran over to him and grabbed his shoulder and said, son, the creativity it flowed onto that pillow, but it was in you the whole time. And you made me believe in myself that I could be creative too. You know me, I'm constantly crunching numbers and adding and subtracting and dividing things on calculators. I'm an accountant. And Carl said, Dad, I know that. You tell me all the time. And Carl and his dad realized that you can continue to find beauty in things that have been hidden behind in dusty corners, things that you don't want to get rid of. You can repurpose things that have maybe taken on a different light. Maybe it's an old wooden door. Maybe it's a pair of shoes you've grown out of. If you put a little bit of love and creativity and you step back and you look at it in a new angle, it could become something different. It could mean something more. So as the sun was setting, they called out, Janet, Mom. And Carl said, that's Mom's name? And he said, yeah, but you keep calling her Mom. And Janet came out, tied her robe, and she said, I was just getting ready to take a bath. What could this possibly be? And Carl and his father started to say, Mom, look. And Bill looked at Carl and said, no, you take it away. You're the captain, Carl. You get to be the one that gifts this beautiful gift. So Carl stepped up in front of his dad and he stood his feet strong into the dirt. And this was the first time he'd ever be presenting any art to anyone. And he said, Mom, I'd like you to take a look at my and Dad's creation called
My Mom Is Out of This World. And Janet was so moved. She was moved to tears. She gave Carl a great big hug. She gave Bill a great big hug. And then after her bath, they hung that gigantic piece in the center of the hallway so that every day when she walked by it, she could see it and smile and always know what a gifted and sweet son Carl was. The end.